Do you love playing with watercolour but need some inspiration? Would you like some tips and ideas for a junk journal page? Today I'm filling a journal with 13 easy doodles. Using pearlescent paint and pencils, I'm painting on an old book page. So if you're bored, take a seat, sit back and relax. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell and let's go. Let's choose a lovely old book page. I've gathered a few books from a recent delivery. I actually buy them by the metre, or in this case the half metre, and they're all a little bit different. They all have their own little story to tell. I'm always inspired when I open a front cover and I see such fantastically beautiful writing like this, a little message in the front of a book. And we're going to use one of these pages today to put some lovely little images on, something that will make us feel good when we create a journal page. I'm looking for a page that's thick enough, that has a lovely texture when you feel it, and also the right size for in our journal. I do this by just flicking through the pages, seeing how thick they are, looking at the font because that will show through when we paint our doodle, and thinking about how it will work in our journal today. I have an unfortunate habit of almost adopting every book that I buy, every book that I receive, treating it as special and not really wanting to cut it up and use it, but equally wanting to put it in my journal. So I'm rather tortured when I flick through and think that I might be pulling a page out, but equally excited to be using these lovely pages to really good effect so that we can enjoy ourselves and be inspired when we're perhaps a little bit bored at home. This book has got gorgeous smooth paper, but it's perhaps a little bit thin, and I'm mindful that when we're painting on it, that paint might just seep through. So have a think about the thickness of the pages and whether it will work in the context of the paint or the watercolour pencils that you might be wanting to use. This book is almost done. I've been using lots of the pages. I really like the black and whites, the glosses on the left there that you can see, and it's a great compromise. It's vintage, it has some of that aged colour, but it's also got some thickness and some matte feel which will help when we paint. So it's time to gather our paints. I have the water, and we're going to just put a little bit of surface on this book page to begin with gesso. So I'm trying something new here. I've been having a bit of a play, and when I can get the lid off, which isn't too easy, I'm going to put some in my palette and mix it with some acrylic paint. Getting rather messy there, but I think that's part of the fun. I'm taking a tube of acrylic paint in a pale beige shade, and I'm putting a bit in the palette so that I can mix that with the gesso. And as well as adding a little bit of water to bring it together, I find that putting this on the book page creates a bit of a key. It also gives us an opportunity to slightly change the colour and shade of the background on the book page, and on top of all of that, I just think it's a little bit of fun to have a play with some new supplies and some new ingredients. I haven't really used gesso before, but I've had this little pot on my shelf. I've seen a few artists on YouTube using it quite frequently, and I feel like I ought to just have a go and see what I think works. So all I do is mix a slightly diluted quantity and daub it across the page. I'm not going all the way to the corners, I'm not being tidy, I'm not even being equal in the distribution of the colour. And indeed every book page that I cover with it gets a slightly different effect. But all in all, what I do is build up a few pages like this of keyed surface that we can then play on, that we can doodle on, and it's fun and it's easy to do. These are some of the pages that I have gessoed before. This one was mostly white. There was a tiny bit of colour in this one, and I really like that one. I might use that in a minute. I've also been playing with a rather dark green. Perhaps this is too much. I guess it depends on the project that we have in mind. But you can see I've been having a liberal go, just playing and just seeing how it all works. So I'm pulling out a page that I choose to use for the doodles, and even though there's an image in the middle, I think that will work. I think that will add to the page when we're finished. So today I'm going to play with some watercolour pencils, and I'm starting by creating 13 little boxes. And the position of these boxes, the little rectangles with rounded corners, just reminded me of stepping stones, which is part of the theme that I have for the journal page today. I felt like it was about stepping forward from July to August. So little hopscotch place marks. I don't know if you know hopscotch. Did you play that as a child? 13 little boxes that we're going to fill with colour and then doodle in. Having fun, really easy doodles that we'll do with a black pen. So the colour that I'm bringing to the page is initially using some new watercolour pencils. This is a set of 48 from Arteza, and the reason I like this particular set, as well as the soft, easy use on the paper, is it's actually in an upright container. So despite there being 48 pencils in the tub, they don't take up much space on my desk. So for practical reasons I really like them, but I also like the range of colours. I've chosen 3 shades to work with today, and those are Burnt Ochre, they are Plum, which is the pink that you can see now, and also a beautiful shade called Pear, which is a muddy yellowish green. And I chose 3 that I thought went together, but also shades that I thought were a little bit different. And as I'm looking at the page in front of me now, there is no doubt that this has been inspired by, perhaps subconsciously, CC, so Creation CC here on YouTube, a huge influence to many of us. I'm sure that many of you know her, and if you do, drop me a comment down below. So I'm taking some water and a brush with a relatively flat nib, a flat end, and dragging that colour, the pigment from the watercolour pencil, into the box. And the reason I use the pencils is it gives me control. I found it a little bit more difficult when I was painting just with watercolour paint, so whether that was from a palette or a tube. But with these pencils I can decide how much water to add to that pigment to get it to ignite, and then I can drag it where I want to within the rectangle. And it's really easy to do, very easy to work around those colours, and I get a very pale shade in each box, which means that I can play with these absolutely gorgeous pearlescent paints. I'm adding some water, and I've chosen a rusty brown in the bottom right of that palette. These are Fine-Tech Coliro paints. I have used them a few times before, and what they do is give you a beautiful see-through metallic sparkle that you can layer on top of other colours. So what I'm doing today is choosing shades which are somewhat in the vicinity of the colours that I have from the watercolour pencils, and just adding an extra layer on top. I can still see the text on the book page behind, and the gesso key really helps because I've still got enough stiffness in the book page. And colouring those little boxes does remind me of the journal page that I did in April. It was a Stay Home With Me spread, again inspired by Creation CC. I painted some little houses using gouache paint and some interesting colours. That was fun. If you'd like to see it, I have a video on my channel. I'll leave a link in the description box down below. I'm working on the second colour of boxes, the boxes that are coloured with the pear green, and just dragging that into the centre, and surprisingly yellow it seems to be as I add the water and just get that pigment to work. I like it, but I think I'm going to dampen it down with just a little bit of this pale lemon gold in the Coliro palette. So I'm adding some water, mixing it up, making it a little bit creamy, which is what it seems to need. And with the side of the brush, just layering that over the top. And it seems to take just a little bit of the vibrance out, which is what I wanted today. Again, working on the pink, diluting it as much as I want, leaving some opacity in the centre of each of the boxes, and I certainly don't want them to be even. Great to see that text still peeping through, and I'm choosing this rose gold in the palette to add on top. And this in particular is one that I'm wanting to use to tone down the pink so it's not quite so neon, not quite so vibrant. You can see the rustiness, nearly coloured in the wrong box there, that it brings to that pink, and just tones it down a little bit so that the shades work together a little bit more. I think so anyway. What do you think? Let me know in a comment down below. Do these colours work together? What colours would you use? And I'm drying it off with a heat gun before I go any further, and if I add that heat to both the front and the back of the page, it will stop it warping, which will be good for when we come to add it to the journal. And it's time to do the doodles. I've got 13 different ones for you today, 13 easy ones that you might have a go at, or you might have a few of your own. Do you have a few stock doodles that you add to your pages? And where do you get your inspiration from for doodling? Do you like to doodle on watercolour or on plain paper? Let me know in a comment below. My first doodle in the top left is a little house, and that is indeed stolen from my little page from my April journal spread. So all those houses on the journal page that I mentioned earlier. The second one is just 3 stalks with some leaves. I think it's rattlebush, so I've just drawn 3 simple curved lines, and then I'm going up each of those stalks and adding little duos of leaves. So working little round leaves, left, right, left, right, left, right. As easy as that. The third doodle on the pink box here is some upright lines, and I'm going to add a little bit of contrast, some black boxes between each of those lines. So taking the gel pen, just colouring a box and alternating them along each of those lines, just colouring them in. So maybe you want to put a candle on, maybe you want to get yourself a nice drink, sit at your desk, shut the door and take your time doodling away in the afternoon, filling a journal page with something that makes you feel really good when it's finished and is creative, but perhaps quite easy once you get going. The fourth doodle here is a swirl, so just a bunch of circles in a single line, adding a few extra lines top and bottom just to fill out that box. Doodle number 5 begins with some slightly wavy vertical lines, and on each of these I'm going to add some arrowheads. So some are pointing upwards and some are pointing down. I'm drawing them in, spreading them out a little bit so that there's variety in the spacing. None of these doodles is particularly difficult on its own, but sometimes we all lose our mojo and we can get a little bit bored with our own style and what we already know. So today's video is very much intended just to give you just a little bit of momentum to move off again, to help you when you might be a little bit bored at home and you just want a bit of inspiration. Doodle number 6 there is a few well distributed dots in the box, and the 7th one here is a very simple tree, so just a trunk and a cloud-like set of leaves at the top. I really love using book pages in my crafting, and I have a video of lots of ideas for how you might like to use them in your junk journaling and art journaling. I'll leave a link to that video in the description box down below. You can see that I'm adding a botanical doodle here, so really simple leaves, a collection of leaves on just one main stalk, pointing to the right, and next to that I'm going to add the simplest doodle of all, so 3 or 4 stalks, simple lines, and on the end of each is just a little circle. You can colour in the circle if you like. I think I leave most of them empty, and I'm making sure that they cross each other and have a bit of a gap in this stalk lines, just to make that feel a little bit more real. I recently bought a new book for myself, a new little toy, to give me some inspiration, something fresh for my junk and art journaling, so do stick around to the end. I'm doing a page flick of that and I think you'll enjoy seeing some of what's in it. This doodle is a leaf-shaped design on the last of the pear-coloured rectangles, so I've drawn an upright leaf shape and given it a stalk, anchoring that to the bottom, and then I'm adding an extra outer layer to that leaf, which gives me some boxes, and I've added a tiny little bit of foliage in the middle. I feel like I need some movement from right to left. There's a lot here that's been left to right. So these arrows are pointing up to the northwest of the page. I'm adding some arrow heads to give some definition. I think I've got about 4 lines in there. And then I'm just going to add some lines in the opposite direction, just something interesting, a crosshatch behind. All very easy. In box number 12, I'm adding some horizontal-ish lines. They're wiggly again, and again I'm going to add some little dots to those, and for some reason, I don't know why, it just reminds me of knitting. Maybe remembering when I used to knit myself some jumpers. Does it remind you of that? Or am I just talking rubbish? The final doodle here is more of a splayed out sun, so a circle in the middle with some radiating lines, so something a bit in contrast with the rest of the page, and an extra bit of definition in the middle of that circle. And again, to add definition, I'm picking up the watercolour pencils again, and I'm working around the shape to give it a border. And I thought rather than use just the one colour, I would pick each of the colours in those boxes and create the border using that colour. Maybe not every time. I've also picked up a darker brown there. I just liked it. What I'm going to do is just wet that border and drag the colour out, drag the pigment out so that it softens it, and so is somewhat consistent, I think, with the rest of the design of this page today. So here you can see me taking a water brush and softening the colour, making that pigment melt, and working my way around. Really easy, just dragging it out. And if you want to add more colour and you want it to be thicker and broader, of course you can go back and just do another round. And once the pigment is wet, I've wet all of that border, I then go around with an extra amount of wash and just drag it out. And I just like the effect that this gives. It makes the cleaner paper that we have around each of those boxes just a bit more apparent, which I think helps deliver some contrast to each of the boxes and the doodles within them. I'm taking a black pen now and putting a box, I know it's wiggly, it's not perfectly straight, it isn't meant to be, but putting a box around 4 of those doodle boxes, and then I'm doing the same again with another collection of 4 boxes. And I just felt that this added a little bit to that idea that these were more about stepping stones or hopscotch places on a pavement. It just gave that sense of collections of 4 boxes and a bit more definition. And here we have the 13 doodles on a vintage book page using watercolour pencils and simply a black pen. So now we can add it to our journal page, and I just want to bring down the size. I want to rip it down by hand, and I'm using the fact that some of that paper is wet to make tearing off easier. So working around the doodle, taking off as much of the border as I want to make it fit, to make it work on the page. I'm just trimming it down. I was delighted this week to see my friend Barbara at 49 Dragonflies to use some watercolour pastels on a journal page. I think you'd really enjoy seeing that video, so I'll link it in the description box below. She created a beautiful spread with a butterfly and some yellow and teal colours on the page, and it's just a really inspiring video, so do check it out. Before I add our little collection of doodles, I want to add some background so that the vintage page, that book page, isn't sitting on stark white colour. I want to do some sort of watercolour like this that I did in November, just to offset that stark white to break the page. So I've used the Colour Roll metallics again, like I used a little bit of metallic in that journal spread there. And again, before I add the doodle collection, I also want to bring some texture onto here. So I'm stamping using this little grid. It's an Adirondack ink pad in the shade Oregano, a beautiful shade of green, so rather gentle, not stark black. So I'm picking a few spaces here and there to add it. Going off the page seems to help, and of course I want it to stick out behind the book page that we're going to glue on. Maybe not perfectly upright, but I don't think that matters. Choose where you want it to go, maybe a little bit on the side so we have balance on those two pages, maybe a tiny bit just here peeping off the page. Time to add our colour on the left, so I'm using my relatively strong glue there. At this stage what we don't want is anything too watery. I don't want it to ripple the paper, so this particular glue that I use is nice and thick and flexible and not too watery. When I have a spare moment in an evening, I sit on the sofa and cut out a few little didges or fussy cut some images. So today I'm using some from a beautiful collection of quotes from Tracy Fox. I'll link her channel in the description box down below, and from that channel you'll be able to find some really gorgeous didges in her Etsy shop. I also have some didges in some future videos from the lovely Tina from Shabby Dabby Doodah. So I'm really enjoying selectively choosing some beautiful images or quotes to add to my designs. It's a lot of fun. I like to mix it up, maybe not to use too many didges, but just bring them into the design here and there. I think they can really add something in the right place. Do you use didges in your journal pages, in creating your junk journals? Let me know in a comment down below. I would really like to know how you bring it all in and integrate it into your own designs. The labels that I'm adding here I chose because of the colours of the borders and also the style of font, which I really like. There's a typeset font in these. There's also a mixture of letters and numbers which I like, and some handwritten script as well on one of those labels. So I've layered a couple of them up and added them, distributed them around the page on the right so that I've got space for a title here. From July to August we're moving forwards on those stepping stones, but the space on the page isn't just in a box. I'm going to allow the words on the page to wander from left to right, to tumble down the page as we write. Maybe something irregular is what I'm after. And the three headings to my journaling that I'm doing today are things that I find help me when I am a bit bored at home. What I like to do is think about planning future things that are fun, actually doing some things that I'm enjoying, and maybe looking back and thinking about or reviewing what's worked well and what I can do differently, what I can do better. And one of the plans that I have coming up, and I'll be sharing it very soon on my channel here, is to play with an altered book, and I've wanted to do this for quite some time. So I had a go at a page recently, a couple of pages in this lovely vintage book, and it's all about easy journaling, maybe stealing a few structures from the world of bullet journaling, but giving ourselves an easy time. So writing, collage definitely, there's a little bit of nice script that we bring to the page and some gluing down of images and pieces of paper, everything that's fun, everything that we enjoy. So I'm planning to do that very soon, and of course today I'm enjoying doing a doodle. So I thought, what could I do that would be fun, what would lift me? And one of the ways that I'm staying uplifted and inspired is, let's say, stealing a few ideas with glee from my friend Helen's book, Journal with Purpose. And I just thought I'd share a few pages with you today. Helen on YouTube here, Helen Colebrook, has some great ideas that she's shared with us in this book. It's organised around themes like these more autumnal pumpkin pictures. I love the botanics in here. I'm going to have a go at some of those. I thought what I'd do is bring a few of these just very simply and easily into spreads in the altered book. So I don't want to be purist and do bullet journaling, because that for me would be far too hard, far too much like work. But I want to bring some of that into something new, into my altered book, which will come at the end of August. And thinking about what's working for me, what isn't working, and what do I want to maybe reach back and do more of. I want to do a little bit more of this style of collage like I did a year ago. I really enjoyed creating some of these spreads. So somehow I think I'm going to work that back into the altered book. So bring some of the watercolour painting and the collage together and do something that's incredibly easy, satisfying and a whole lot of fun. If you've enjoyed this video and I'd love you to come on this journey with me, then hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, and I really hope to see you soon.